dirt that you dig up across the screen to get the large particulate out of it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that. Larger. He didn't do that because he was expecting to find full, solid bone. So he didn't find it.
Why was he expecting that?
Because he expected to be the bodies of 5 children in a house that had burned and that their bones would not have broken down.
So there was no like briefing on the case of like, hey, this house burned for like 1,000,000 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know why he thought that.
Yeah.
But I will bring up,
like if he was qualified to look for it, he should have also known.
But I will bring up the fact that it's kind of common knowledge how cremation works. I think, now I don't know if at the time it was, but he's a pathologist, so I would think he would understand this. And we'll talk about this now, is that if you don't know how cremation works, they put a body in a furnace for about 2 hours. They burn all of the flesh. The bones, however, don't burn entirely, and they have to be ground up.
Yeah.
So it's not as if we just completely turn to ash. I think he was expecting a situation like that, because the process of cremation, it takes about an hour or 2.
Yeah,
that's it. And then there's just solid bone left.
But the thing about it is these kids, first of all, they were small, lighter skeletons than full-on adult skeletons.
Absolutely true.
And they were in the middle of a house that collapsed on top of them, so they would have been all crunched up.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of volunteer firefighters came along.
And trooped through the site.
Well, they hosed it down, number 1, with high-pressure hose, which would have a pulverizing effect. And then number 2, they trooped through the site, stomping on the bones.
And then 5 feet of dirt were poured on top of the entire thing. I mean, it just
see the problem.
It just seems silly that he would have expected in any way to have found full bones.
I personally, I think that at the time there was a certain professional arrogance in a lot of fields, and I think that he might have suffered from that.
That's fair, yeah.
Okay, so, of course, no bones are discovered when this guy excavates the site.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's a lie.
Oh.
2 sets of bones were found.
Oh.
Some vertebrae and the hand of a boy.
Wow, okay, so
great.
What's the problem?
Except that those bones were never in a fire.
Oh. Okay,
so they didn't actually belong to any of the children.
So they were introduced as part of the fill dirt.
Either they were introduced as part of the fill dirt, or there was a grave that was opened up not too far away, and by opened up, I mean robbed. And people think that somebody might have dug it up and buried the bones so that the family had something to find when this guy showed up, to then give them some sort of closure.
I was going to say, it's weird to me that a unidentified boy's hand and vertebrae showed up in this, and everyone was like, well, it wasn't the kids we were looking for, so it doesn't matter who it belonged to. We don't care where it came from.
I know.
Like,
well, back in
the hand of a boy showed up. What are you...
Well, it's not, you put an APB on a kid that's missing some vertebrae in a hand.
Yeah. I don't know why they didn't do that. No, I knew, that's, I guess, that I would guess it had to have come from that grave.
Well,
or else there would have been a huge outcry.
It had to have, yes.
Where did this come from? Because where he got the fill dirt, like if he just managed to happen to get some remains of it, that's a huge problem.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
It is entirely possible, though, that he did just get it along with his fill dirt. I mean, I have found bones, I just randomly digging, I have found bones.
Yeah.
But human bones?
I don't know what they were, human or animal bones. Probably animal bones.
Probably, they're probably buried by dogs.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not like you can call up the police department every time you come. You could, but eventually they would get a little angry with you.
Yeah. So we're gonna say it was probably from the open up grave.
Probably from the open grave. Yes.
That works.
Now, I said that we thought that they think that somebody put that there for the family to find. Wasn't the only thing that was put on the site for the family to find.
So people were really trying to help the family along.
Yeah. The police chief of the volunteer fire department.
The fire chief, you mean?
Yeah. Not the police chief, the fire chief. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Me know more better English. The family hired a private investigator, actually several of them, and one of them was talking to the chief, and the chief let it slip that he had found internal organs at the site and had buried them in a box on the site after the fact.
Is that air quotes let it slip?
Yes. Okay. I think that's air quotes let it slip.
Okay.
Well, of course, Mr. Sauter wants to know, the PI, and he gets the chief to take him to the site, show where he buried it. They dig up this box, which they immediately run to the coroner, who immediately opens it up and says, "Oh, Yeah, this is a beef liver.
Ugh.
And it's never been through a fire. And it's kind of fresh.
Yeah,
and this is at least a year later.
I'm not sure that I believe any of this because, I mean, the chief can't be that dumb as to think that, and he could have just put it through a fire and then buried it.
You know what, I don't know, man. This is one of those things in this story, and there's a number of them that we've already talked about. I just don't know where that came from. I can tell you that this part that we just talked about has spurred a lot of conspiracy theories and put the chief at the heart of that, along with some other people.
Yeah.
We're not going to go into that particular theory, but
yeah, but the whole theory is like, you know, I mean, he's from Sicily. Mr. Sodder's from Sicily, so there's a mob connection, of course. The ladder was missing. The truck wouldn't start. Well, they couldn't get to the operator.
It's all a giant conspiracy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like the parents of the child who commits suicide.
Yeah.
Suddenly things don't add up, so it's got to be a plot. Yes. The investigation by the police eventually was closed and continued to have the same ruling that it was an accidental fire and that the children died in the fire. Like, the cops nobody ever changed the ruling. They humored the family and they looked into it again, but they closed it.
Yeah.
And then they refused to look at it any further, despite the objections of the family. They had made their decision. And that also is something that fuels people to say, oh my gosh, there's something going on. They ignored it on purpose.
Yeah.
Which I personally don't believe. There were some things that the Sodders did that really helped keep this story alive.
Yeah, the billboard.
The billboard is exactly what I was going with.
But if you've looked at this case on the interwebs
You've
at all,
seen the billboard.
the billboard is no longer there.
No, it's not.
But it was there for years.
20, 30 years, something like that, yeah. It was a billboard, and it was only a couple feet off the ground. It wasn't, the giant, tall one that you see on the side of the freeway.
Billboard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Had the pictures of their 5 children who had disappeared before the fire. Note I said disappeared before the fire because that's the way the family sees it.
Yeah.
And the story, asking for anyone to come forward with information. And several people did.
Shocking.
And
People always do.
I'm going to give you a couple of them. And these are ones that you'll see in the lore. I just don't get why they're hung on to with so strongly. Because the first one I want to talk about is a woman named Ida Crutchfield. Ida says she saw the children on the night of the fire and that they were at her hotel being supervised by 2 Italian males.
No, is this a hotel?
Adults.
Was this a hotel where she was staying at, or that she owned?
She worked at the hotel. She worked there. As Joe's talked about, the family was Italian. They were actually immigrants. I think Mrs. Sodder came over when she was 3. Mr. Sodder came over when he was like 14 or 15, something like that. But they were natively they're native Italians.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Ida. What she says is that the children, she tried to talk to them. The adults gave her the stink eye. They then brusquely talked to the children, who then clammed up and wouldn't talk to her anymore.
They talked to the kids in Italian, right?
They talked to the kids in Italian.
Now, did the Sodder children speak Italian?
I don't know. You know who else I don't know spoke Italian or even knew what Italian sounded like?
Ida Crutchfield?
Yes.
Yeah.
How did Ida know that?
Well, actually, it's possible because I heard that Fayetteville actually has a pretty decent-sized Italian immigrant population, or it did at that time.
I'll give you that.
So, yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've heard this. Yeah.
But here's some other problems with Ida. She never saw the pictures of the Sodder children until 2 years after the fire. She then waited another 5 years to come forward with her story for a total of 7 years from the date of the fire.
Yeah, it does sort of reduce her credibility.
Yeah.
I think to be nice, I'm going to say that she was trying to help and really just wanted to be involved.
Want a little attention. Because, frankly, if you showed me pictures of 5 children and I had seen them 5 years before, I doubt that I would remember them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you know the answer. Did Mr. and Mrs. Sodder, did they come over with their families? Like, their parents brought them over, right? They must have.
Mrs. Sodder came over with her family. She was much too young to come on her own. Mr. Sodder came over with his older brother, who basically hit American soil, turned around, and went home.
Okay.
So he was on his own.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because my grandfather came over, and they spoke Italian to him. He was older than this,
Right.
obviously, but that was, the family still spoke Italian. So I don't know if the grandparents were involved in the Sauter children's raising. They may have spoken Italian to them, just to address that question.
Yeah, no, it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
A lot of children of immigrants wind up bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's
at
entirely
least
possible.
partially.
Yeah.
Enough to understand somebody sternly talking to you, because that's how Nona did it. You mean Nona? Your grandma?
Oh, I've never heard.
Oh.
Nona,
I've never heard
Nana.
Nona.
I thought it was Nana.
Okay.
In my family, it was Nona. I don't know if anybody else calls them.
Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got some more reports of the children.
Yeah.
There were reports that the children were seen on the night of the fire across the street in a taxi.
That's a great
Sure.
getaway vehicle.
It really is. I mean, well, they were spotted, of course, because locals came to watch the house burn, because what else are you going to do on Christmas Eve in 1945?
Yeah.
Some other locals who were at a bar who heard about the fire and wanted to see it and hired a taxi to haul them to it, and then had the taxi haul them away. And that's who was spotted
And they just
believed
happened to look like children age ranged from.
Have you ever seen a
14
bunch of drunks in a car? They
Yeah.
look like kids.
They do.
They really do look like
Yeah.
Yeah, they're acting like kids too.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where the story sat. Like I said, it was looked into, reported locally, and then it just kind of sat there for a while. And it wasn't until the 60s when a magazine ran the story and spread it to the world that it really kind of gained traction. And that's probably one of the only reasons that we know about it, is
Yeah.
because it got so publicized.
And that, of course, is going to attract cranks to the story.
It's going to attract a lot of people. I mean, the Sauters, they tracked down every lead they got.
I'm
they
sure
went
they
after
did.
them.
Yeah.
In 1968, they got a really weird lead, which is Mrs. Sauter went to the mailbox and she found a letter with no return address, but it was postmarked from Kentucky. Inside of the envelope was a picture of a young man that sorta, kinda, maybe looked like their son Louis. He was 10 when he disappeared. This is 23 years later,
Yeah,
so
that's
that means he's the
He's
photo
33.
looks like a man in his early 20s, but at that point he would have been in his 30s.
Yeah, okay.
It's an odd bit that they immediately said it must be him, but they say that. Well, on the back of the photo, I think this is probably why, if this is true, it says, Louis Sauter, I love brother Frankie. Is it Ilil Boys?
Yeah, little boys. or-
Ilil Boys? Yeah, I never know what that means. Followed by the alphanumeric of A90132, or maybe it ends in 35. Not sure.
Yeah, but he didn't have a brother named Frankie, right?
No, that's the weird thing.
Yeah,
That's the really odd thing about this photo. I know I was about to say something else.
Yeah, you were.
Okay, so the Sauters, like I said, they chased everything down. They didn't tell anybody what town in Kentucky this postmark was from, but they sent a PI to that town to look for the sender of it. Sadly, they chose a really bad PI because that PI took their money and never came back,
Yeah.
which sucks.
Yeah, it seems like if you were an ethical private investigator, you would tell these people not to waste their money.
Well, I'm sorry, but 20 some odd years later, you're looking into this case, you probably just want to get a couple of bucks.
Probably.
And sit around on your duff and do nothing. Mr. Sauter, he died in 1968, so not but about this. Actually, it would have been the same year that they sent the PI off.
Yeah.
He died that same year. Mrs. Sauter, she died in 1989. Both of them died believing that their children had been taken and that they didn't die in the fire but were taken.
Yeah.
The whole family, because there are generations that have lived on, all seem to believe this. It's
All of them?
all of them. Almost all of them. I think there's one member of the family who never talked about it, and I think that's the one family member who didn't believe that they had got out.
Which one was that?
That was the older brother, John.
Well, yeah, the thing about it is John shook the kids awake before
Yep.
he fled down the stairs. Now, John is telling the family doesn't necessarily believe him. They think that he's just feeling guilty over fleeing the fire. And so, but if John
He
knows
said that on
that
the night that it happened, like evidently one of the investigators asked him that night, or somebody asked him, and he said, no, I shook him awake. And I've actually read stuff from cops that say the first statements that somebody makes right away, those are usually the true ones.
Yeah.
Weird.
After that, they start getting regrets and remorse and doubts, and they'll massage and change their story. But he said that on the first night.
Yeah, and so John has to know that the kids were in the house. And so there's no way they could have been kidnapped.
And he's probably got regrets of, I should have just shaken him and run. I should have grabbed the little boogers and hauled them out with me.
Well, he can't exactly grab 5 kids, but he could have at least grabbed a couple of the little ones.
Yeah, one under each arm,
Yeah.
you know?
And said, come with me, other 2.
Yeah. I mean,
he was 23.
Totally,
He could have, a 6-year-old and a 8-year-old,
he could have
grab
hauled
him
them
pretty quick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So he probably should have.
But also, he was 23.
He was, 23, not really thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of guilt on everybody's part. I'm sure everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Normally, this is where we would stop, because this is kind of where our story ends. Normally, we would jump right into theories.
Yeah.
But we're not going to.
What?
Why?
Because remember in the beginning I said that there was a lot of bad retellings and there were things about the story that get just hammered on, and then people just figured that they must be part of it, and that's why something else happened.
Yeah.
Well, I found some of the answers to some of these things, and I want to kind of put some of it to bed.
Right, debunking.
Well, not necessarily debunking as taking some of the wind out of the sail.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember that funny phone call that the Sodders got?
Oh, the refrigerator call.
Yeah, the refrigerator phone call.
Yeah.
You will hear it said that there was laughing in the background, and the woman giggled when she was talking to her. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, and actually they tracked down the phone call, and it was a woman who lived in the area, and she did totally call the wrong number.
Well, and she could have been giggling. I mean, she could have been drunk.
She could have been drunk. It's Christmas Eve.
At midnight,
Yes.
she accidentally dialed the wrong number because she was drunk, giggled, and said, oh, oops, sorry.
Well, see now, but the thing is, there's theories out there that say that that phone call was a warning to the family.
To get
waking
out.
them up so that they could wake up and get out of the house before it caught
hour
on fire.
and a half.
Yeah, not.
I know.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the point is, they figured out who the lady was, and she really was trying to call somebody else.
And she really did remember.
She really did call
and
somebody
she
else.
remembered misdialing.
Evidently, yes. Or the operator misconnected her.
Yeah,
one
or
of the two.
something, yeah.
Such things are not unknown.
Oh, yeah, I
Yep.
guess that was an operator.
It was an operator
Era.
system, but it
Yeah.
was the wrong number.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe the operator was drunk.
Yep. Okay, we're going to do a bunch of remembering here. Remember when Mr. Sodder couldn't find his ladder?
Yes.
Yeah, somebody stole it.
He did. It was down an embankment. Turns out there was, this is the weird thing, it was some guy on their property, either pre or post, and one of the things he was trying to steal was their ladder.
It had to have been before.
It
If
had
the
to
ladder
have been.
was
Well, I don't know if
missing.
he was trying to steal things before the fire, because he was caught after the fact on the property trying to steal stuff.
Yeah, but
So he didn't care that the property was on fire. He was trying to steal things,
yeah.
which is just the dumbest thing in the world.
Well, it sounds to me like because the ladder was gone right after the family evacuated. The ladder was gone, so he was there before the fire started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He said he stole the ladder to cut the phone line. And admittedly, the phone company said that, yeah, the phone line looked like it was cut, but it was also cut at the top of the pole, which nobody believed that this guy could have climbed all the way up there with the ladder and cut the line.
But-
also, why the hell would he cut the line?
Yeah.
But why did it look like it was cut then?
According to the phone, I'm guessing that it wasn't pulled by pressure and snapped or cut with a knife. It looked like it was actually cut with snips is the impression I got.
But the question still stands: why was the phone line cut?
That is a
If
good
the guy
question.
couldn't have gotten up there with the ladder,
To be honest, the house was on fire and the walls were falling in, and I'm betting that the walls fell over and pulled the wire and it snapped and looked like it was cut. That's my personal opinion. Totally the way that I would explain that.
sure, that's
Sounds.
But nobody believed this guy that he cut the line. He did eventually. He got arrested for, I'm not sure whether it was the attempt or the actual success in stealing things from the property. He was stealing block and tackle, which, if you don't know what block and tackle is, it's pulleys and hooks and ropes used to pick up heavy things.
Yeah.
Mr. Sauter hauled freight. He had to pick up heavy things by himself.
Yeah.
He had a pulley system.
Yeah.
Weird that that'd be what you would just try and steal, but sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of untraceable.
Yeah.
That's true. No serial numbers.
Totally useful in an area where a lot of manual labor takes place.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, here's the other thing. We talked about John a little bit and the fact that he had shaken the children awake. What I don't think we've talked about, and you don't always see, is that George Jr. and John, both of them, their hair was singed when they got out of the house.
Oh.
Yeah.